Hello, everyone. My name is Marvelous Naze, and I'm a research associate at Represent Women. I'm so excited to welcome you to Represent Women's inaugural Black Women in Politics virtual panel event. Today's discussion centers on our recently released brief, Breaking Barriers for Black Women Candidates. This project underscores our commitment to inclusive research that mirrors the diverse experiences within communities of color. I was inspired to write this brief because women of color are often lumped together. However, meaningful change will require a more nuanced approach to solutions-driven analysis because women of color are not a monolith. And as the leading organization advocating for gender balance through democracy reform, our research should reflect that. Several of the women here today contributed to our research through interviews, and I'm honored to welcome them to our discussions. This brief sheds light on the hurdles faced by Black women when running for office and proposes actionable solutions to increasing Black women's representation in our government. Discrimination, whether based on race, gender, or the intersection of both, poses significant obstacles, not just for Black women, but for our entire society. Despite comprising 8% of the population, Black women are severely underrepresented in politics. That includes our elected roles nationwide. For example, only 5% of Congress members are Black women, pointing to a pressing need for change. Our research identifies key barriers like inadequate party recruitment and funding disparities, which hinder Black women's political progress. Our plurality voting system also presents challenges. Winner-take-all plurality voting systems disproportionately favor candidates who receive the most votes, but not necessarily a majority, resulting in governments that are not fully representative. Women are often told to wait their turn so that predominantly white, male candidates can take center stage. This political sidelining particularly hinders Black women candidates who often face stereotypes of being less electable or lacking leadership skills when compared to white candidates. This emphasizes the urgency for electoral reforms like ranked choice voting. We propose actionable steps such as increased early party recruitment in Black women, equitable funding measures, and the adoption of the electoral reforms like ranked choice voting. These strategies can level the playing field and amplify Black women's voices in politics. Look, it all comes down to this. Empowering Black women in politics isn't just a moral duty. It's vital for a truly representative democracy. Once again, thank you for joining us. Before we kick things off, I want to quickly note that the chat is closed, but audience members can submit comments and questions in our attendee survey form, which is being shared in the chat. Closed captioning is available in your Zoom menu. I am now excited to introduce my colleague, Council Member Victoria Pelletier, who will lead our first session, a roundtable discussion with elected officials. Council Member Pelletier is a woman of great conviction, strength, and hope, who is currently serving as the second Black woman to ever serve on the Portland, Maine City Council. She will be joined by three incredible women leaders. First, we have Delegate Jackie Hope Glass, a dedicated social entrepreneur who served in the United States Navy for 11 years and now represents Virginia's 89th district. Jackie is also president of the Ballantine Place Civic League, chair of the NAAC Armed Forces and Veteran Affairs, and ambassador to the United States of Women. Next, we have Councilmember Lorianne Sales, a community activist and public health specialist from Montgomery County, Maryland, who made history in 2022 as the first Black woman and Jamaican American to be inaugurated as an at-large member of the Montgomery County Council. She's currently running for Congress to represent Maryland's 6th District. And last, but certainly not least, we have former Mayor Chastity Wells Armstrong, the first African American to serve as mayor of Kankakee, Illinois. She now works to empower women at Catalyst Coaching and Transformation. Welcome to all of these amazing women. And with that, take it away, Tori.
Thank you so much, Marv. And hi, everyone. Those bios were sounding really good. I was like, yes, 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 with everything that all of you have accomplished. So thanks so much for being here. Again, a huge shout out to Marv and the rest of the research team at Represent Women for this incredible brief that has sparked this really necessary discussion that I just want to jump right into. So as mentioned, my name is Victoria Pelletier. I'm the National Partnerships Manager with Represent Women, and I'm also the second Black woman elected to the Portland, Maine City Council. And I'm here with some really inspiring women that I look up to, and we're gonna have a talk. We're gonna have a conversation. In my head, I keep calling it like a conversation on the couch or like a kiki on the couch, because I really just want to ensure that we can all share our truth and our stories honestly, especially as elected officials and Black women. We don't have a lot of environments where we can just be us and we can celebrate our Blackness, but also talk about our experiences in a format where people just have to listen. And in addition to a conversation where people have to listen, we also talked about safety. So as Marvelous mentioned, the chat is off. The threats against Black women, myself included, while serving in public office are very real. So a safe environment for this conversation was really important to myself and the rest of the Represent Women staff. So again, there is no chat, there is no Q&A. And we've asked people to submit their questions ahead of time. So it's really just us here. It's us and like 57 other people, but it's just us in this little space that we're in. So I want all of you to know that you are safe here, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here and to have this conversation with me today. So about a year ago, I got into a call with another Black woman who I hadn't met before, but was also in politics. And we just wanted to meet and get to know one another. And the first thing that she said to me when the Zoom screen opened up was, "How are you?" And I immediately responded back, "I'm good, how are you?" And she looked at me for a really long time. And then she said, "We're going to try that again. How are you?" And in that moment, I realized I was so used to just immediately responding, "I'm good, how are you?" Especially in non-Black spaces. And she actually had to remind me that I was safe and that I could tell the truth about how I was. So that leads me to follow into her footsteps for the first question that I want to ask the three of you, and anybody can jump in. We're a small enough group, so feel free to unmute and answer the question. How are you?
Well, I'm burning at both ends of the candle because we are in the midst of budget season, and I decided to jump into a congressional race to represent my district because the incumbent is running for Senate, and so. As someone who currently represents over 1 million residents, I'm on two very powerful committees currently, our Economic Development Committee and our Health and Human Services Committee. And given that I'm the only one with a public health background, it's very important that I track and monitor and oversee all of the resources that are allocated to those endeavors, especially with the historical impacts that communities of color, small women, minority-owned businesses have experienced, especially post-pandemic. So, dealing with those issues, I'm glad we're in the middle of budget season, which should come to a close at the end of the month. And then the campaign should have its a little break. Next week is election day. And so, but this is consistent with what Black women do. We continue to persevere, we adapt, we pivot, and we are known for getting the job done by any means necessary. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my sorority sisters. I am a part of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And so we're all about getting the work done and being in this position. It's so too important not to focus on the work ahead and just make things happen like we always do.
Yeah, absolutely. And burning the candle at both ends, that, yeah, I feel like that's a constant phrase. And it's just like, we're going, we're great. But also there's so much happening and there's so much to do. And as you said, we always know how to get the job done. So Jackie, Chastity, I'm curious, how are you? How are you feeling?
I see Chastity gave me the nod, like, "Gone, girl."
I saw that too. She was like, go ahead. Get after it.
No, I mean, if I could be so candid, I am in a season of a lot of angst. Not for the political work that I do. We're in budget season too, so I'm going back up next week to hopefully finish the business of the Commonwealth. But one thing I have to hold in my hands is that I'm a mama. I got two little citizens, and my son is leaving for college. And God, it's like I'm mourning, but also excited at the same time. It's been, I feel like I've been mourning for maybe a year or so, but it's kind of getting real because graduation's coming up, and then my daughter's getting her body's filling out and stuff. It's like, what is happening around here? So I say it could be better, but it could be worse. I feel like I'm in a season of gratitude, but like I'm angst, right? Like just from the place of existing as a son says, a middle-aged woman, that it's just, yeah, it's a lot to hold in hands. But I'm so grateful to be here, though. Really, truly.
We're so happy to have you, all of you. Thank you. Chastity, how are you?
Thank you all. I want to thank Represent Women for hosting this panel discussion and holding space for us today. And Councilwoman, I am lifting you up. I know you have to be exhausted. You were very polite in your answer of burning the candle at both ends, but exhaustion is what you're describing, is what I'm hearing. And Delegate Glass, thank you for your service. I have two sisters that served in the Navy. So thank you for your service. I am building a coaching practice to support women who work in government. And I am very diligent about learning as much as I can so that I can have the most impact that I can. So I'm no longer serving right now as an elected official. My focus is on coaching and on doing some DEI work as well. And on the positive side, I have another baby coming in the family. My daughter is getting ready to have my third sugar baby, another boy, 3 little boys. So she's due on June 5th. So Delegate Glass, I can empathize with those little pains you're feeling, but just trust and know that you have poured into them the best that you can. And if they're going to go off and do great things, and the mistakes they make, they will learn from them. Absolutely.
Thank you all so much for just giving me a vibe check, just kind of like setting the scene on how we're all doing. I heard angst, building, burning the candle at both ends, could be better, could be worse. I'm like right there with you. I feel like all of those apply to me as well. And I feel that as a Black woman, I feel that as someone in politics, who has been in politics for several years now. So I appreciate it. And there's so much I want to talk about, but I think I want to start at the beginning about life before we get to life in office, the campaign process. And Lorian, I know you can speak to this now as well, because all of us have had unique experiences, but I also feel like there's going to be so much overlap. So in the brief, in Represent Women's brief, we touch on the specific barriers that Black women face when they are running. So low levels of recruitment by political parties, to winner-take-all voting systems, to the lack of investment from donors. That one hit me personally. I had to do $5 Fridays to get elected, which was like, you donate $5 and then tell a friend to donate $5, and hopefully we can raise some money, even though nobody knows who I am. So I was really hopeful that I could just hear about your experience as well. What are some other barriers that you faced while running for office and campaigning for office as Black women?
I think it may be consistent across the board, but money, access to capital. I'm so glad that our county created the public financing system that we oversee. So as long as you are in the county, it's triple matched. There's a similar program at the state level for anyone running for state office, the governor, lieutenant governor. So we need more opportunities to level the playing field. When we're already making 40 cents on the dollar, it shouldn't be hard to see that we're going to struggle trying to get a seat at the table. We just have to work that much harder and then reward ourselves. So there has to be a balance, because yes, while I am burning at both ends, I do know the power of self-care. So I am prioritizing that and ensuring we do something as soon as the campaigns are done. That's a priority. Have a post-election trip or treatment.
Yeah, and I think I think it's I don't know how to put this without, there is this culture of and I think it's historic culture of extraction from Black women that you find even in the campaign trail. They want you and they want you for free. And that goes, all the way back to the beginning of our existence in this country. I find that, that is, we can all probably put money on the list as one of the things and go even deeper into that about even when you do get it, when you start finding out how much other folks are being given up against you. I had a little hurt feelings at first, but I was like, that money ain't it's not defining. But it would be nice. It would be nice. Part of that for me was that personal balance of feeling like as a woman from my financial background, like growing up with very little and then going out and asking people to like how painful that is to do that and do it over and over and over again. I'm terrible at fundraising, but everybody's like, you're the best, you're great at it. But it stresses me out. Like it, and then in that level of stress of having to do this thing, this act in order to be, and also knowing that I'm coming to the table, one as a woman. So I have to qualify everything, right? Like lead with what's the most qualifying thing about me, just to even have conversations, and then being Black. It just is like it is a 1-2 punch, and it's like take the bruises, find the life balance, because there's also this expectation that I be extremely present as a wife, that I be extremely present as a mother and as a community mother, right? Like most of us get into this because we've been doing stuff with our people, and that level of getting the people that love us, but also have that nature of like that we've given so much and they expect us to just keep giving. And then to me, their support on the other end of helping them understand now that I'm working to get elected, support looks a little bit differently. So I need that $5 Friday that, so I need that, like, the challenges I think is we're always we have to be educator legislators too. So I'm campaigning, I'm educating people on what it means to do this thing, because my block is still figuring out. I'm educating people on like why when you donate, yes, I need to know your employer. Like, let me tell you why. I ain't doing nothing crazy with it, but it's difficult. And also I think sometimes I've found for the Black woman that I talk to in elected leadership, sometimes authenticity is suspicious. And it's really weird that it's really weird. And I was like, yeah, you're talking to someone that was not Black, and she's like, I just be myself. And I was like, what? So it's I think those are some things as well, that balance between, and I guess lastly I'll say is as a Black woman showing up holding those two identities and showing up in these spaces, I'm always having to make sure I have the things to affirm my autonomy, and also having the things to confirm that I don't have to assimilate, like reminding myself, like, this is what that looks like for me. This is what autonomy looks like for me in these spaces. This is what not assimilating in a way that's harmful for who I am, who I want to show up and be, because I feel like it's always being tried.
I like that you said authenticity. Did you say is suspicious? Is that what you said? Because I feel that too. And I was also really authentic with my campaign. And Chastity, I want to hear from you as well. But that's so real. I don't know that I've ever actually heard someone put it like that in a way that makes sense to me. Because someone, and I think being authentic too as a Black woman, you already have a lot of preconceived assumptions about you anyway. So then you show up authentically and everyone's like, is she really like that? Is she not like that? And then either way, actually, it can be a good or bad thing depending on who you're speaking to, depending on what they think of Black women and what they actually expect of you. So that's real for me. That hit me personally, and I completely agree with that. And Chastity, I want to hear from you too in terms of other barriers that you felt existed and donations and public campaign financing system, which I know that Lorianne put in the chat, which is extremely helpful, and also a barrier remover that we talked about in our brief. But I want to hear from you on some additional barriers that you felt that you faced as well.
To be additive to the conversation, I would say two things. One is, when you're a younger person running for office, being told that you need to wait. You need to wait your turn. I had an older Black woman that was entrenched in the Democratic Party, and she had worked on elections, from the president all the way down. And when she heard that I was considering a run for mayor, she told me, you need to wait your turn. And I was it broke my heart, because here's another Black woman putting her foot on my neck is what it felt like. And then, but to the positive, an older Black man who also had a similar kind of path, in our area, took me to breakfast and talked to me. And he asked me, why did I want to run? And I told him, and he was like, I'm behind you 100%. The other thing is that when there are multiple Black candidates, then there's this conversation of you need to sit down, you need to wait, because you're gonna split the vote, you can't win. And my motto was that nobody would outwork me, and they didn't. But it's not healthy to live like that, and it's not sustainable. It takes a toll on you when you are grinding like that, burning the candle at both ends for an extensive period of time. It's not a healthy way to live. And that was another Black man in the community that I respected highly. And there were 3 Black men running in this primary and me. And he said, you can't win. Nobody's going to win if all 4 of you run. And I said, but I'm the best candidate. I know I'm the best candidate. Here's my background. Here's my experience. And they're not going to outwork me, and they're not going to knock doors. They're not going to walk the entire city, and they didn't. So those are 2 barriers that I see. The financial piece is unique. I think in my experience, I was able to raise money. I had worked for 2 members of Congress prior to getting on city council and prior to deciding to run for mayor halfway through my council term. A lot of my money came from white people.
Same.
And there seems to be a culture, particularly in my community, is lower socioeconomic, and they don't understand. They don't understand what it takes to run a campaign, to win a campaign, to be able to have the resources to communicate and to gather people and do outreach. That was my experience. So I had a lot of support from people that were outside of the Black community, and quite frankly, it incited anger with my white counterparts, because they didn't understand how in the heck is she raising money. And I didn't come from a political background. I don't have a political family. I grew up in the ward that doesn't have a lot of money, so they didn't understand that. But to hear your own people, discouraging you from running, that was very disheartening for me.
Yeah, I felt that in my own race. And I think if you are not in politics, it's hard to understand the political life. And I've realized that as I've continued on, it has become more insular, and only the people within it understand what's going on. Even my own family, I have to continuously explain what it is that I do and why I need you to come volunteer, why I need this money, why I want you to max out, and how other people are maxing out, and I can't even get you to bring $20. Like it's just it's very unfortunate. And especially when at the heart of a lot of policy decisions and legislation, it's people of color who benefit the most when people like us are at the table making those decisions. And so I don't know how we can communicate that, or how it will translate, how much more needs to be done. But it clicked with me when Obama got elected, and I realized representation matters. Having a seat at the table with people that look like you, have your lived experiences, it matters. And so people will always invest in what they care about. And unfortunately, you know, if it's not a party or something that is not directly impacting their bottom line, it's confusing. But yeah, that's not surprising.
Lori, and I had to laugh when you said talking to your family to explain what you do, because I'm still doing that too. I'm in my 3rd year. And I'm like, so here's what I do. Here's the job, and here's the support that I need. So I am very much with you on that. And I am also curious, did all of us get asked to wait our turn? As of each of you?
Yes.
Becky, Chastity? Okay.
I did not do any party politics prior to this role. And I actually like tried not to do it because it was like party stuff. Like I was like, I don't do party stuff. But it was just some substandard practices happening. And then I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just go ahead and actually, let me not pretend like I decided. My husband straight said to me, he was like, all this time you be showing up and ain't nobody ask you to show up. And it's one time the community like step in and you like, nah. But that was the community. The establishment was like not for me. As a matter of fact, I think every Black person in the legislature was on somebody else's flyer. And it was like, I was intimidated in a way. But I essentially was like, you don't get to decide to run. Like the establishment decides who does this. And that's just it. And I was like, well, I don't even know who the establishment is. I ain't never met y'all, what y'all got going on, but I've been in the streets. And my husband told me I either need to stop lying to myself or stop lying to us and find somebody to run or run myself. So like, this is what we're doing. So yeah, it was just like know your place more so than it's not your turn.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That definitely a know your place, which is so funny because look at all of us. We all want our races and here we are. So it looks like it worked out. And I want to move into winning the election as well, because I know, Jackie, you just said who's the establishment. So the who's for me was who's Robert and why do we have so many rules? What's going on? I don't know what it is. That was my like, I don't know what I'm doing moment. I've never held public office before. I was a total newbie. I was learning as I went. And I guess I'm curious in terms of like support, mentorship programs, leadership programs as Black women in office and really, I guess, getting ourselves immersed in this world. Did any of you have any experience with any type of like mentorship program that you saw that existed for Black women?
Not particularly. Yeah. Like I did course, the Run As You Are with Vote Run Lead, which was really helpful, I think, and initially started me on the track of just like plugging in, because this is the first community that I've actually lived in, put roots to the ground since separating from the military. But there was nothing that was just us, and like, or at least that for the level of government in which I was engaging with, right? You have other organizations, but it's like you got to be running at the federal level or you got to be at some executive level. But I can't think of any that were like, hey, Black girl, come on, go get you some love with your other sisters. I don't think there was one.
Yeah, and Chastity, you're shaking your head no, and Lorian as well, that you didn't have any programs, and we were all kind of newbies just learning on as we go.
I am creating, and that's one of the things I want to create through my coaching is to create a program for women, but specifically to have mentors, I would say no. The municipal league at the state level provides some basic training on, when new elected officials come on board, but there was nothing accessible to me as a Black woman to be able to connect and network with other Black women electeds and have that experience.
I would agree. It would have been nice to have that community. But no, I did do Emerge, Maryland. I also did the Elizabeth Warren training training when she was thinking about running for office that I thought was really helpful, but never seen anything created to build a pipeline or an army of, qualified sisters from across the country to lead and serve in their community. So definitely an opportunity.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, look, Chastity, you can't see me looking at you, but I'm looking at you. I'm like, well, looks like we're really excited for what you're putting together. Yeah, Jackie, go ahead.
Chastity decides to do that. There's also this thing when we start to run nonprofits that help us, right? Or for-profit businesses that help us. The investment in those sorts of things is also very helpful, like for staying with, like it's needed, obviously. But sometimes we don't know who's been out there trying and just haven't had the funding or the opportunities to scale.
Yeah, and also shout out Boat Run Lead. Jackie, I know you mentioned Lorianne, I know you mentioned Emerge, both represent women partners. Especially in the audience today. So a huge shout out to both of them. I know the links were put in the chat. So did we all just learn as we went along? Did you get a book that was like 101 on being a Black woman in office? And how, I guess I'm curious in terms of how you got through, especially those first couple of weeks and months when you are elected, you are now in office, everybody's looking at you, everybody's emailing you, they're calling you, they want to meet with you, especially for, those of us being political newcomers and those of us who they did not think would win our races. What were those first few weeks like for you as you adjusted to this new public facing role?
I can start. So I think I won April 7th, and like Councilwoman Sales, I'm glad to hear she's taking a trip, and that's what I did. I was still working for Congress full time, and that was a commute, an hour and a half a day commute to work, campaigning, running my own campaign to get elected as mayor. And so after I won, that was a Tuesday, we left and went to Atlanta for a quick trip, and we were coming back Sunday. I said, I need to go to my people. I went to see Martin Luther King's house, and I was down there talking to him, and I'm like, I know I'm in for some stuff. And while I was there, I got my phone started. I just text messages, phone calls. The police chief left. There was no conversation with me whatsoever. And I channeled Michelle Obama, and I said, when they go low, I'm gonna go high. And so I was just like, you know what, everybody needs to calm down. We're gonna be okay. I'm also a social worker, so I went into that mode. We're going to be okay. And there's nothing I can do about this right now because I don't get sworn in for 3 weeks. I have no authority to do anything. And he left. He retired. He had told the incumbent that he may, leave. And so instead of having a conversation with me, I was completely blindsided. And we had no police chief. So when I came in, I didn't have a police chief or a fire chief. And that just set the tone for complete chaos and madness in the city. What they didn't know is that I am an avid reader. And I am extremely resourceful. And I had worked for 2 members of Congress. So I wasn't an idiot, and I had served on community organization, and I was in my professional association for the National Association of Social Workers. So I had some stuff with me, and I just leveraged that. I leveraged people that I could trust that had more political experience, and I read a lot. When they would come at me, they put an ordinance on for the first meeting where we were changing power, and they were trying to restrict my authority to be able to do things through an ordinance. At the very first meeting before the meeting that I was getting sworn in at. And so, I laid in bed and would read ordinances. Like, that's the kind of person I am. I'm prepared. And when you come at me, I'm going to quote article, blah, 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 section 126, blah, blah. They weren't expecting that from me. But that was the kind of energy in the battle that it was. It was a battle. It felt like a campaign for 4 years because they were coming at me for the entire 4 years. And it started when he decided to leave the police department.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah, I can, yes, attest to having to study, up on the role. I think because I did start out in party politics from the start, I had an understanding of what constituent services entailed, and did a lot of meetings during the onboarding process with all the department heads, and just attended a lot of the meetings because I think there's a level of mystery to the work of being a lawmaker. And it's really deciding how to appropriately allocate tax dollars to the benefit of your people, and do it with integrity, and ensure that we are maximizing the return on our investment. And so I have a background in public health. I've worked at a lot of nonprofits, and so I approached it that way. I've been nicknamed the data hound because I ask all the data related questions. And before I started, I would, go through and, look through all of, the notes, the packets. I used to see those packets and I'm just like, how am I going to get through this? I got my daytime job and this was just a part-time job at the time. And then the pandemic hit. So yeah, it's so-called part-time. But when we had to even do the salary evaluation, and we all looked at how many hours we all put from the mayor on down, we were pulling over 40 hours each week. And so, you can't turn off your job as an elected official on Friday at 5 p.m. when you have events 24/7 around the clock and you're getting emails 24/7, emergencies you have to respond to. We had 2 police involved shootings. I got elected during the pandemic, first Black woman, only woman on the council at the time. So there were a lot of moments that I had to seek community and support from people outside of my immediate colleagues, that made the job more bearable, but getting up to speed on a lot of the issues, and just making sure I had to manage everything. I mean, as a city council member, it's totally different now that I'm on the county council. But I remember any programs I wanted to do, I had to plan, create, and do everything. I had no staff, no access to staff. It was very, very minimal. Only the mayor had that sort of support. So it was a lot of building the plane as I flew it. And yeah, it went well, but it was a lot of trial and error along the way.
Yeah, that similarly, no staff over here. And also when you both did this, I was like, I know exactly what they're talking about. That was nice because I was like, oh yeah, like a part-time job that people think is a full-time job. We do not often get a living wage, which is another significant barrier that exists as well.
Yes.
So Jackie, I want to hear from you. How were your, first couple of weeks? What was that like for you?
What, y'all, on the full-time job with part-time pay and full-time problems?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so setting the stage, I got elected in a special election. So I literally was elected to office on a Tuesday night at about 8, and then had to be up in the Capitol the next morning by 9 o'clock to like swear in. And so it was like knowing after I won, it was a firehouse caucus. After I won that was like, I had to negotiate a lot of things. Like, who do I?
Oh my gosh, is it me or is it Jackie? I was on the edge of my seat with that.
I know our delegate is.
Oh no, Jackie, hopefully.
Do I take somebody? Huh?
Jackie, you froze for a minute and we were on the edge of our seats with what was going to be said. You might have to start.
Really? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Am I good?
Yes, go again. Yes, please.
Where did I stop? What did I stop? What did I say?
From the start.
From the very beginning.
Firehouse.
Holy God.
in at
Killed it. I took somebody that I trust more so than somebody that had knowledge, right? But being up there, and I think that was the smartest decision that I made because there was no one to talk to. Remember, all of the Black people up there were like, we didn't pick her. And nobody really had anything to say to me. Like it wasn't, I didn't know any of these people. But I remember the first weekend that I came home, I received several phone calls and they were, listen, Jackie, you come off as unintelligent and immature because you wear sneakers and your hair is too nappy.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't even make that up. I even had somebody offer to buy me shoes, and I was like, you have no idea what is on my feet costs, and making the assumption that I can't pay for shoes. I said, well, first off, you know, I never told any, like I never had an answer for them. I just took, I received. I'm like, okay. And I cried for that weekend, but I recognized like I have fibromyalgia. I don't have to share that with anybody. I want to keep my knees. Okay, like I want to keep my knees, number two, and I don't give a damn what you have to say about my hair because it's mine, and I purposely nap it up. I like have a napping comb that naps my stuff up. So like it was a debate with, do I make this change now? And these people, which were majority Black folks, I knew it was coming from the Black folks, right? Do I make this change? And then they get to say they made me do this thing right now, and then continue to think that they compromise the things that, you know, like form me and mold me. And it was hard. I mean, like it was hard. It felt like ostracism. It felt uncomfortable. But I'm going to tell you, by the end of that session, them white folks in there were like wearing Fridays with me. Like I do Fridays. I wear my J's on Friday. All up in there. Like the guy was next to me was like, look around the chamber. You see what you did. I was like, I see healthy people. That's what I see. But it was hard. I didn't really have anybody, and it wasn't hectic because I'm deployed, right? Like deployed in chaos. And so it wasn't chaos. We tend to do infrastructure, women, right? Like which is the pretty stuff that people don't see. We're not building them the bridges and the libraries first. We fix the internals. And that's what I felt like saved me that first week. It's like, I can't focus on how people feel about what I'm carrying, what I'm doing, who I am. I got to build this office out. And that kind of saved me having to build that infrastructure and make it through those first couple weeks.
Wow.
You know, I will also say, you know, as Black women, especially if we're the first, it's hard to even think about making a mistake because we're constantly thinking not just about ourselves, but the women that are going to come behind us. And so getting up to speed, staying up long hours to make sure you are over prepared is just something you have to quickly do. And you have to grin and bear a lot. And thinking about the public health impacts, the mental, the physical, heart disease impacts us the most. So stress, it's a high stressful job, but it's that important that we will do what is necessary to, as I started out saying, just get the job done. But knowing underneath the surface and that calm demeanor, how much we are dealing with and absorbing just to ensure that we're making it better for the next person behind us, it can take a toll. It can take a toll.
Absolutely.
Corey, I just wanted to add, I just
1 minute. So yes, please go for it.
Okay, I was just going to add, you know, even though I had the experience with the police chief and I came in with no fire chief, most of my department heads and the people that I hired were great. Mm-hmm. And we were a diverse, dynamic team. And so, like my comptroller, for example, she had served under several mayors and had been there for a long time. And like, I just got joined at the hip with her. So really learn the finances, because my predecessor always said, I passed 7 balanced budgets. And with me being Black and being a Democrat and, you know, had some financial struggles prior to, you know, I knew they were going to be all over me about that. And so we were a very dynamic team and got a lot done. We had balanced budget surpluses, brought COVID money back, all the things. And I just want to say to Delegate Glass, you are beautiful. And I am so sorry that someone was that ignorant to say something like that to
I
you.
cannot.
But our appearance is also attacked. And I don't know if Tori would get to that, but I'm sure we all have stories about that as well.
We have so much to say. Also,
I know.
Jackie's Friday Instagram, we put it in the chat. So you're going to have a lot more Instagram followers that are following along with Fridays for you. Thank you all so much. We're at time and I have a million more questions for you, but that is always how it goes. I could talk to Black women forever. I want to thank you all so much for your time and for being here. This has just been a really important and inspiring conversation. And again, thank you for your service. Thanks for everything that you do. This work is extremely hard. I look up to each of you. I hope that as much as you advocate for other people, that you are also taking time for yourself, doing the self-care routines, offline. Tell me what your self-care routines are so I can start to get mine going again, because I need a good one and I got to focus on that. So thank you all so much on behalf of myself and Represent Women. You do incredible work.
Thank you.
We're very, very happy to have you. So we very much appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I see Marv on the screen, so I will kick it over back to you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Wow, what an inspiring conversation. Thank you to Victoria and our esteemed panelists of elected women leaders for your thoughtful, soulful, and illuminating answers. Next up, we have our second session with advocates and experts. Our moderator is Glinda Carr, President and CEO of Higher Heights for America, a national organization building the political power and leadership of Black women from the voting booth to elected office. Glinda is a dynamic thought leader who is celebrated for her innovative leadership style. Not only is she a dedicated advocate for Black women's political participation, but she is also a respected political strategist with proven results. Our first panelist is award-winning author Nadia E. Brown, professor of government and chair of the Women's and Gender Studies program, and affiliate in the African American Studies program at Georgetown University. She is also a lead editor of Politics, Groups, and Identities, a journal of the Western Political Science Association. She will be joined by Kimberly Peeler-Allen, a political strategist and the co-founder of Higher Heights for America. She is also a visiting practitioner at the Center for American Women and Politics. Kimberly has been working at the intersection of race, gender, and politics for over 20 years. Rounding out the panel is Brittany Buford, an innovator and strategist with a deep knowledge of campaign management and partnerships, who is the managing partner at Partners in Democracy. As a reminder, audience members can submit comments and questions in our attendee survey form. Closed captioning is available in your Zoom menu. Now, I'm thrilled to hand the mic over to our moderator, Glinda Carr.
Thank you. Excited for the conversation today, particularly because this is a great group of experts, practitioners, visionaries, strategists, and more importantly, my girls. And so, as I think you've heard all afternoon, this is going to be conversation style. That last panel was like on fire. And I think speaks to a little bit about what we're going to spend our hour on, which is talking about kind of like, what are the barriers, what are the opportunities we have moving forward. We've partnered with, each one of y'all, Higher Heights. I'm always going to like rep when Kimberly and I saw we were both going to be in the panel, like, what? The squads. But in 2011, Kimberly Peeler-Allen and I sat in a Brooklyn cafe and literally mapped out what do we need to do to engage Black women in, I'm already getting all familiar. I'm all laid out like this. Familiar. How do we, what are the barriers and opportunities that exist? And I think this starts from the reason why we've seen this incremental gains of Black women in political representation and political power over the last 13 years has been in part by organizations like Higher Heights and many of the other Black women-led organizations that have been doing the work for decades, or who have, recently invested and doubled down on this work. But it's also the practitioners like Brittany, and the activists and strategists like Brittany, and more importantly, we believe in some good research. And so, Professor Brown's research has really allowed us to create the blueprint right? I am, when we originally did research with the Center for American Women in Politics, and I'll open it up for discussion, ladies, it found that, the major barriers in 2014 were, right? Black women were not invested in early when raising their hands to run for office, that it was difficult for them to navigate the political structure, right? Our political parties and organizations that support women's candidates and the gatekeepers. And more importantly, the research found that not only were women not encouraged from running for office, that women of color and Black women were actively discouraged from running for office. So I think we've come a mighty long way. And so we are seeing more Black women running for offices where they have earlier support, that are encouraged to run for office, but there are similar barriers and now new barriers. I call it the carrot stick. Once Black women have, created a pathway and a blueprint, one of our opponents have decided to move that carrot stick or change the pathway. And so Dr. Brown, share a little bit about your thoughts around kind of the current landscape. It has changed in the last 10 years that we've been working with you, right?
Oh yeah, completely. I gave a presentation this morning to some colleagues from Germany interested in Black women's representation, and I was sharing how much has changed. So there were things on my past slides that said things like Black women might be able to win non-majority minority districts, and then right, you're thinking like Lauren Underwood is and others right are kicking butt, but Lauren Underwood is bringing in the top donations. Not only is she representing right these non-majority minority district, but she's doing so in ways that are set in the path for other Black folks by being able to share out the money that she's raising. There were really like a very myopic way of thinking about Black women as this monolith, that there's this one size fits all. And right in the 10 plus years, Black women have really shown that there is important diversity to pay attention to within Black women, right? So we could think about things just on face value, not face value, so to say, but things that are more prescriptive, like Senator LaFonza Butler as being the first Black lesbian in the Senate. Or we could think about ways that millennials are now taking, center stage, thinking about Representative Jasmine Crockett. Right, and so a lot of these, whether it's generational differences or sexual orientation differences, there just weren't enough Black women there to be able to say that we can look at some meaningful differences in how they're behaving. But I will say some of the things that are challenging that remain are what we just heard from our first speakers, right? The first panel, the same kind of conversations around money. Now, there have been lots of things that have changed, right, since then. Places like Higher Heights, the Black PAC, right, emerge, right, when Emily's List was headed by LaFonza Butler. But still, right, there's challenges remain that Black women have difficulty in fundraising. That's proven to be pretty constant. Also from my research, that seems to also remain constant is the frustration and lack of support that Black women feel in political parties. Right. And they're feeling that the Democratic Party is not doing enough to respect and value them as leaders rather than just workers. And I'll end with this point, and I'm so glad that Represent Women has taken the necessary steps to make the electeds and us, right, included, be safe in these online forums, because I started looking back over my research, and there were instances in the data like in 2009 onwards where Black women candidates and electeds would talk about, intimidation, sexual harassment, political violence, but it wasn't systematic, right? It was also kind of this one-off thing that I wasn't really sure what to make sense of it. And even the candidates or electeds themselves weren't really sure what was happening. I think the big difference or things that have changed since then is that we have a name for it, and probably because it's way more pervasive. And there has to be new conversations around how Black women deal with physical threats to their bodies, their families, their homes, outside of just some of the things that we were talking about earlier. So not a good thing, but something that has changed in the 10 plus years. And I'm seeing this seeing this through research, and now doing a new research project on political violence against Black women mayors.
Great, thank you. Brittany, what have you seen from the beginning of your work to now, and kind of what we think is next?
Yeah, a lot of the same things. I mean, I've been doing this for 16 years now. And so there have been tons of changes that have been made. And, you know, as many changes as have been made, things are staying the same. There are still the same campaign finance laws that exist that create ongoing financial barriers for a lot of Black women running for office. Availability of resources. I know Nadia just named a number, including Higher Heights and Black Collective PAC and others that are now there. However, those are still not being funded to the same level as other PACs. And so when you look at those in comparison to both party and other non-minority PACs, we're still receiving a fraction of those resources and donations that are coming in. My thing is, we need to be putting more hard money towards candidates themselves, not towards party. And others may disagree, but the parties have talent pipelines. Those talent pipelines don't always extend to Black women. And that is one of the largest things that we need to change if we're looking at this as a systematic problem. Campaign finance laws and very honestly, just party guidelines vary from state to state. As long as I've been doing this, if I went to a different state today, I would at least have to spend a week to a month researching on the different policies and the different laws that are enacted in that state in order for us to move forward with a candidate, or the candidate to move forward with even getting to a place where they're named a candidate, not even getting to the election. So between campaign finance laws, varying election calendars, which are things like Massachusetts has one of the latest primary seasons in the country. I think it actually is the latest primary season in the country. On the other hand, Florida's is very early. So the amount of time that we as Black women are able to raise funds, it's a barrier. It doesn't work. It causes us to not only lose out on resources, but also lose out on funding that's available.
Yeah. So I want to share a little Black Women Lead by the Numbers before I let Kimberly respond. So in 2014, when the Higher Heights and the Center for American Women in Politics put out our first status of Black women in politics, there were 18 Black women serving in Congress, 0 Black women U.S. senators. We now have 31 Black women serving in Congress. That is progress. But when you talk about opportunities that exist, we've only elected 2 Black women to the U.S. Senate and appointed 1. If you take our country's history and put this in perspective, there's only been 11 years that upper chamber has had a Black woman's voice in that body. 11 in 200 and what? Nadia, catch me right. 235 years. Is our country's founding
47 247
247.
Yeah.
In 2014 there were only 2 Black women serving in statewide executive office. We now have 11, and you hear on a daily basis the impact of Letitia Tish James as the New York Attorney General. In 2014 there was 241 Black women serving in state legislatures. There are now 383, right? That's an increase of over 100. And I'm horrible with math, y'all. 140 additions. In 2014, there was 1 Black woman serving as a mayor of a top 100 city. We now have 8. And so, Kimberly, share a little bit about your thoughts and reflections on the gains we've made, and then what is your thoughts and vision on a pathway forward?
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing those numbers because it's both the, the progress, you see the growth, but there's also, still so much challenge out there because we know that even with those gains, Black women still are not at parity for their proportion of the population. We should have 7 Black women in the Senate serving at the same time. And we should have, 3 governors. We have yet to elect 1. So there's still a lot of progress that needs to be made. But I see that there is a path, and so much of that path is being able to show the possibilities that exist. Even though Stacey Abrams was not successful in her 2 runs for governor, she has shown people what the possibilities of a Black woman in executive leadership look like. Seeing the number of Black women who have run and won in Congress, the number of Black women who are possibly poised to be elected to the U.S. Senate this year. And the number of Black women as mayors. It's one of those things where if you can see it, you can be it. And the vice president is also definitely in that line of vision of the possibilities. But in a structural way, we are seeing the start of a turn of how we talk about leadership. And that's one of the things that between the activists and the research and the work that we've been doing at Higher Heights and so many other partners is being very intentional about how we talk about Black women's leadership and recognizing that Black women lead differently. We do not lead like our white male counterparts, which is what this country has always been used to seeing. We are very much relational leaders, and seeing the strength in that and seeing how, people like London Breed in San Francisco made the decision early on to how to keep her city safe during COVID, and looking at people like Tashura Jones in St. Louis and the work that she has been doing, and Vi Lyles down in Charlotte. There are examples of what leadership can and should look like. And beyond that, it's also looking at, public financing and raising money for campaigns is always a challenge. But we've seen in New York City with public financing there, where they have a campaign finance matching program with intentional investment and recruitment and support. The city council of the city of New York is now majority women for the first time. And the majority of those women are people of color, and they have a record number of Black women serving in that chamber, including a Black woman speaker. So there are possibilities and there are pathways. It is never a straight line as much as we would like it to be, but we can look and see glimpses of how we are climbing this ladder collectively. And the adage that a rising tide lifts all ships is very, very true.
Yeah, I would say that the numbers speak to themselves. The activism to get us to this moment is a testament about Black women understanding how to look towards the horizon and the work that needs to be had. Here at Higher Heights, we certainly believe that kind of the Sankofa moment, right? You have to look back to be able to see forward, that we're going to look back that, the foundation of this is a Shirley Chisholm. I don't know if y'all have seen the movie, right, on Netflix called Shirley, but there is one of the most impactful scenes to me is when she's meeting with Huey Newton, right, who was probably 20 years her junior. And he says, what is just a Brooklyn teacher going to do running for president, right? And her response is, well, Sojourner Truth, like she rattled off all these Black women in history, Fannie Lou Hamer was just a sharecropper. It is something around that Black women not only leading with their experience as Black women, but the notion that many of the Black women that do run for office come from the very sectors that we need to actually move this forward. So just a teacher is important, right? In 2018, when we elected the largest number of Black women to be elected at the same time, we elected Johanna Hayes, just a teacher, right? Happened to be the teacher of the year. We elected Lauren Underwood, just a nurse, who's a public health professional. We elected Ayanna Presley, who is was steeped in government and had been on a city council, Ilhan Omar, who's a Somalian refugee, and Lucy McBath, who was just a mourning mother of a slain Black boy. They stepped into leadership in an important time in a pre-pandemic that allowed them to lead in a very impactful way, right? When we're talking about COVID-19 and educating our young people from home, that our city governments were being grappled with budget deficits, that there was a Muslim ban. And so share a little bit about when someone says, what you're just why elect Black women? Is there an impact?
I mean, I've been asked this question a few times in the past 6 months as we lead up to this coming election year of like, why is it important for Black women to now have a stake? The reality is, as people just mentioned, like Black women have always been in this position. We just haven't been named, right? Black women have been the leaders of their communities in every facet of life, whether that is as a teacher, as you just mentioned, or in nursing or in other ways. And we've traditionally placed community and family above self. And it's shown not just in when we're elected and how we're elected, but also in how we vote. And we've seen time and time again, as people like Ilhan and Ayanna are elected, that they're able to come in and create rapid change in meaningful ways that connect with community. And one of our biggest issues with many electeds is that they actually don't truly understand how the policies really affect the communities that they are being put on. So electing Black women is paramount to closing like these gaps that exist, to ensuring that community has access to the resources that it needs, to ensuring that other Black women have access to office. As was just mentioned, New York City's council is now majority women. And we have seen the changes that are coming and have come quickly. So this is the greatest time of need for Black women to be invested in and have representation within our elected offices.
Anyone else?
I think she pretty much said it all.
You like drop us. And so I think that we used to call this like proof of concept. Like, what much more of a conversation do Black women need to have about our ability to lead, right? Over the last couple of weeks, there's been some high profile comments about Black women and their ability to lead. This notion that someone, may have training wheels when in fact that they are degreed. Not only are they, have credentials from an education perspective, but has not only been elected on multiple levels. And so there's something about this moment that people are threatened about our leadership, right? Including the people who originally encouraged us to run for office or to lead. Right now, if you look at the political landscape, Black women are leading at every level of public service, right? We have Black women in the cabinet. We have Black women on the Supreme Court. We have a Black woman who literally can walk down to the Oval Office. Skip on down to the Oval Office. There are Black women leading not only the Black-led and Black-founded organizations, but Black women that are leading some of our largest national political organizations. That is what we imagine this world to be. And so I think some of the backlash, right, I'm going to call it backlash around our leadership, is this notion like, oh, we didn't actually think that you would be able to step into and lead in this power. And so I would offer this for a reflection to the three of you. As we imagine the possibilities of Black women's political leadership, what does that look like to you? And then what do we need to do to ensure that Black women can continue to lead very boldly and free and frankly safe?
So
Go ahead, Brittany.
go right ahead, Natty.
So, I mean, so perhaps, okay, so what this would look like to me is to actually have Black women set the table as opposed to being just invited to pull up a chair. And in my research, a lot of what I find are Black women responding to an agenda that somebody else has already asked them to weigh in on. And some of the most innovative public policy or responses to crises come when Black women just get to talk about how they think things should work without giving a prescription to fit into, right? And I would think about this in order talking to my students. Like, I have a little pin with a folding chair in homage to Shirley Chisholm. And I think about, well, it's okay that you bring the folding chair. And there's other acronyms or metaphors about, well, if you don't like what's at the table, serve something else. Or but if Black women get a chance to pull up that chair to the table and decide that what's on the menu isn't what they want, but have the opportunity to create the menu that they want to see, I think that's really powerful. And unfortunately, I think that we, and myself included as a researcher, kind of lacks that imagination to just let Black women just run wild and say, this is actually the thing that I want to address. Because most times the women that I speak with in my research are responding to a crisis that is not made by them, but it's on them to fix. And how much more imaginative could we be if Black women could say, this is an issue that I see and I want to address this? And not even just about the policy concerns, right? But even how governance happens in general, right? So would Black women say that an electoral college is something that suits them or their interests or needs? Like could Black women think about a system even outside of democracy, right? Is there another form of governance that we haven't imagined that could help Black peoples be whole and value humanity, right? Some of these more radical, kind of like imagination centered or forward prescriptions. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of, what I'm getting to, right? So everything that we do is a reaction, and it's a reaction because everything's been set by a white heteropatriarchal supremacist society. So what if we don't? What if we opt out of that society? Can our minds be bigger and more complex than having to always respond to marginalization?
Yeah, I agree with that. 100%. And Glenda and we talk about this all the time about the importance of investing in Black women so that they have the space to dream and dream what the possibilities could be. And we are, Nadia, exactly what she said. We are generally brought in to clean up somebody else's mess. And then when we do a phenomenal job and get everything right, then they want to change the rules of the game and we are no longer part of the process. But they needed us for that particular space. But what would it look like for us to not be having to lead under, just under fire, and just lead to be able to paint the green pasture of what we want and what we see our communities needing, and come up with the creative ways to serve as many people as possible? Because one of the things that we have talked about continuously at Higher Heights and in the broader ecosystem is that when Black women thrive, it's not just Black women and their families, it is their communities. It is because of that intersection that we walk at, because we are not just Black, we are not just women, we are also small business owners and veterans and professors and doctors, and we are also, caregivers and parents and, children, and all of these things with the overlay of race and gender. When we address these things with that lens of who is, I just had this conversation with someone about the number of the few number of OBGYNs in this country, and then particularly the just abysmal numbers of Black OBGYNs in this country and what that means for Black women's health. How do we give the space to say, how do we create not just good health care, because those Black OBGYNs are not just seeing Black women, but they are seeing all sorts of pregnant people, and making sure that they have positive birth outcomes, whatever they are looking to have. And so it is that rising tide and being able to walk at that intersectionality that it makes sure that everybody wins. And if we invest in Black women and give them the space to dream, aspire, and the resources to then build, and not build at a diminished rate and having to pull things together with a paperclip and I was gonna say paperclip and bubblegum like we're MacGyver, but actually say, okay, we want some sustaining organizations, we want some sustaining institutions that can actually create the pillars, nationally, locally, so that our communities and our nation truly thrive. Because when we are not thriving, the nation is not thriving. And I think folks are, some are starting to get that. Some are realizing, oh wait, we're not as good off as we thought we were, or well off as we thought we were. But there's just so much work to be done. But it is the lack of opportunity to dream that I think is our biggest hindrance.
Well, Kimberly knows I like a good show too. So we have two more kind of just questions about solution oriented, but I would leave this section about the possibilities of when Black women can dream beyond the rainbow. So The Greatest Showman, there is a song called A Million Dreams, and the chorus says, and I literally have been playing this every day because it fuels me. Because every night I lie in bed, the brilliant colors fill my head. A million dreams are keeping me awake. I think of what the world could be, a vision of the one I see. A million dreams is all that it's going to take. A million dreams for the world we're going to make. And so if Black women actually just had, a space to dream beyond this moment, if people are at awe with the way we lead, they actually have the ability to kind of dream beyond the moment. So we wouldn't be here if we weren't going to talk about structural and policy changes. So in this moment of living through some of the most politically toxic and racially divisive times, what are the concrete steps that, as practitioners and everyday people, donors, activists, couch activists, people who dip their toe in and out, what are some of the structural policy changes that are on the horizon, or that we can dream big? As you're aware, there's work happening around the Fair Representation Act and other acts around eliminating and addressing systemic barriers around our representation.
Well, I mean, yes, absolutely. The Fair Representation Act is critically important. We need to, thinking blue sky, and then I'll come back to what is actually moving. But restoring the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act to its original context and intent would, I think, move things tremendously. As we've seen, the pendulum, we know in American politics and politics in general, the pendulum swings back and forth. And, in the late 60s, with the advent of all of those bills, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, that the pendulum swung in one direction, and there was a constant fight. Soon thereafter, started with the Federalist Society at all, to swing it back into the opposite direction. I think it's time for that pendulum to swing again, so that would be kind of like when I was thinking about this question. It was like Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act. We got to get them back to the original text. That's one. But I think thinking about the things that can make concrete changes and change the experience for Black women in elected office or seeking elected office. There are efforts around in state houses around protections and making sure that there are clear guidelines around what is acceptable interaction with elected leaders and what is not acceptable, and the appropriate response, a boilerplate appropriate response by law enforcement to protect these people who are serving on behalf of the people of their state and of their district. So that is one piece that is moving. Some states are moving faster than others. Some states are much further along in the process, but it is something that is evolving. And I think the attention over the last, particularly since the 2016 election and the vitriol, not just at elected leaders, but also elections leaders, people who are directing and officiating our elections and what they're experiencing. There's been a lot of attention on that. And then as a former fundraiser in New York City, I cannot speak more about public financing and what the opportunity that presents, because so many people say, and particularly Black women who I've worked with for years have said, I cannot, raise money, or my network doesn't have the resources to write these big checks. But in a system where a contribution, in some cases it's under $100, or a contribution up to $250 can be matched 4-to-1, 6-to-1. By sometimes it is very rarely it is tax dollars. That is a misnomer. It is not tax dollars. It is money that has been either refunded or from abandoned bank accounts, or resources that have come through gambling. There are pots of money that these matching funds are being drawn from, that allow people to mount the types of campaigns that they need to, with the resources that they need, but also with the organizational campaign building, which is where Black women really excel, because it is that touch, that life upon life, and being able to say, oh yeah, that's my neighbor, and saying, you know what, your $10 is really going to mean a lot to me, because it will be matched and it will help me connect with more of my neighbors so that I can be even more effective in my campaign and represent you. So those are two things that I would say, well, three things if you count the Civil Rights Act, et cetera. Those are the things that I would definitely point to as structural reforms that can happen quickly, that have also already had a proven track record of having an impact on improving the outcomes for Black women candidates and elected officials.
And I'll quickly add to that. I know we're drawing close to time, but I also want to make mention, for those who have been elected, is the professionalization of elected officials creates a huge barrier, not only while running, but also while in office. We still have 26 states in the country that have a mixture of part-time and full-time elected officials, even at the state level. And those elected officials, I think council member Sales in the first panel mentioned, she's that at points in time, she's working 40, 80 hours a week. And there are several elected officials working those hours with less than full-time pay. And we're already on the lower side of the pay scale in this country. To get Black women elected to work those hours, to draw away from families, away from ability to go back to school for education or to even have a second job. A lot of these members have second and third jobs still. These are all barriers to having these folks run a second time, or for them to support others in running. If you know that you're struggling in a spot, you can't, in good faith and conscience, tell somebody else that they should be in this same spot. So these are all barriers, but definitely agree with what Kimberly mentioned, and we've got to support Black women in politics.
The last thing I will just note really quickly, if I can, I just have a new study out that surveyed over 3,000 Black women about the 2024 election. And what we found is that Black women fear voter suppression as the biggest threat to democracy, which is something that we haven't talked about, particularly in the media. But so it's not interference from a foreign country. It's not some party officials trying to tamper with votes. It's back to voter suppression. So just to kind of back up what Kimberly said, this is what's on front and center of the minds of Black women in the electorate. And Restoring Voting Rights Act, I think, is something that we should be pushing more fully.
Yeah. So, ladies, I really appreciate the conversation today. I will say, because all of us have been doing this work for over a decade, the notion that Kimberly, I said this the other day when we were at the Black Women Lead event. When you imagine beyond the rainbow, when the conversation about Black women was not a daily conversation or a conversation that was on a mainstream, that it was small conversations across this country, and that research, like Dr. Brown's research, people were reading it, but it wasn't brought, I think you would agree that the platform has changed. And so that says something about the work of Black women behind the scenes, Black women who, from that last panel, who have boldly stepped off the sidelines to lead in a very tough time. Thank you for being Black women who lead. And look, I'm yelling back 3 minutes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much, Glenda, Nadia, Kimberly, and Brittany, for this powerful conversation. We have heard about this queen throughout the event. Shirley Chisholm once declared, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring in a folding chair. Well, today we just didn't find seats. We built our own table at the Breaking Barriers for Black Women Candidates event. And we'll also be creating our own menu, as we learned in the last panel. My name is Ashley Thurston, and I am the Communications Director for Represent Women. We extend a heartfelt thanks to all of you for joining this important conversation on breaking barriers for Black women candidates in celebration of the release of our brief. To our esteemed panelists, your willingness to share your stories and expertise is an inspiration, and your courage is deeply admired. Black women are the cornerstone of our communities, enriching our lives every single day, and fighting the relentless fight for democracy deserves our profound gratitude. As a Black woman myself, I am particularly grateful for your vulnerability, your brilliance, and for honoring the legacy of the women who came before us by sharing your power. You are paving the way for a brighter future for all. We would also like to extend a special thanks to our research associate, Marvelous Mays. Her insightful brief, Breaking Barriers for Black Women Candidates, sparked a powerful conversation that is critical to our advancement. So thank you, Marv, and our research team for your brilliant work. Let's keep the conversation going. We've shared the attendee survey and some helpful resources in the chat. Your feedback is valuable in helping us improve future events. So please take a few minutes to complete the survey. If you have additional questions and would like to continue the conversation, please consider joining our member platform, the Women's Power Collaborative, a vibrant community where advocates and leaders convene monthly to share knowledge and resources. Together, we can build a more inclusive future. Don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms, including TikTok. This marks the end of our virtual event. We will keep the chat open a little longer so you can grab those links. Thank you again for joining us, and let's continue to break barriers together. Have a great evening.